Hello there, dear friend, and welcome to this quiet corner where history whispers its most haunting tales. Before we embark on our journey into the frozen heart of medieval cities, I want to thank you for being here tonight. Whether you're nestled under warm blankets, preparing to drift into peaceful slumber, or simply seeking a moment of calm in this hurried world, I'm truly glad you've chosen to spend this time here with me. If you'd like, leave a comment below telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always such a comfort to know that we're all gathered here together, scattered across the globe, yet united in our love for these gentle tales from ages past. And if you find yourself enjoying this slow journey through history, do consider subscribing so you won't miss our next story together. But for now, let all the tensions of your day simply melt away. Let your shoulders drop, your breathing slow, and your mind drift back with me to a time long, long ago. A time when the coming of winter meant something far more terrible than we can easily imagine today. A time when entire cities teetered on the brink of collapse, when the frost and snow brought not mere inconvenience, but a genuine existential threat to urban life itself. Picture, if you will, a medieval city as autumn's last golden light begins to fade. The walls rise high and proud, encircling a tangle of narrow streets and timber-framed houses that lean toward each other like old friends sharing secrets. Church spires pierce the graying sky, and from countless chimneys, the first tendrils of smoke begin to curl upward, mingling with the cooling air. The city is alive with the sounds of preparation. Merchants call out their wares in the marketplace, their voices taking on an urgent edge as the days grow shorter. Carts rumble over cobblestones, laden with the last of the harvest from the surrounding countryside. Barrels of salted fish, sacks of grain, bundles of firewood, all being brought in through the city gates before winter's icy hand seals the roads shut. You can hear the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer, forging nails and hinges for shutters that will need to hold fast against winter's fury. The baker's ovens glow warmly, filling the streets with the comforting aroma of fresh bread. Though soon enough, the grain will grow scarce, and such smells will become a distant memory. Children run through the streets, their laughter bright and careless, not yet understanding the shadow that approaches. For winter is coming, and in the medieval world, winter in a city was a very different beast than winter in the countryside. You see, we might imagine that cities, with their concentration of wealth and resources, with their stone buildings and organized institutions, would have been safer places to weather the harsh months. But the reality was far more complex, and in many ways, far more dangerous. Cities were remarkable achievements of human civilization, yes, but they were also precarious experiments in living. Delicate ecosystems that could be thrown catastrophically out of balance when nature turned hostile. Let us settle in and explore together why medieval winters brought cities to their knees, why the very things that made urban life possible also made it desperately vulnerable when the snow began to fall and the temperature plummeted. It's a tale of human ingenuity and fragility, of triumph and tragedy, of communities clinging to survival by the thinnest of threads. Take a deep breath now and let yourself sink a little deeper into comfort. Let your eyelids grow heavy if they wish. There's no rush here, no urgency. We have all the time in the world to wander through these frozen streets of long ago.
The Gathering Cold. The Little Ice Age, as scholars would later call it, began its long and terrible descent upon Europe sometime in the early 1300s, though of course no one living through those years knew they were witnessing the beginning of centuries of climatic shift. To them, it simply seemed that the winters were growing colder, the springs arriving later, the summers becoming shorter and less reliable. Imagine standing in a medieval city square in the year 1310, watching the sky. The clouds hang low and leaden, pregnant with snow that seems reluctant to fall, but inevitable in its coming. The air has a sharp, metallic quality that makes your lungs ache with each breath. Old-timers gather in doorways and shake their heads, muttering that they don't remember winters like this in their youth, that something has changed, that the world itself seems to be growing colder. And they were right, though they couldn't know the scope of what was happening. Average temperatures across Europe were dropping, sometimes by only a degree or two, but those small changes had enormous consequences. The growing season shortened. Crops that had flourished for generations now struggled to ripen. Mountain glaciers advanced down valleys they had abandoned centuries before. Rivers that had always been navigable began to freeze solid for months at a time. For cities, these changes spelled trouble of a kind that would test them as never before. Cities, after all, were fundamentally unnatural places, concentrations of humanity far beyond what the immediate land could support. A city of 10,000 souls, 20,000, even 50,000 in the case of the great metropolitan centers like Paris or Venice. These places could only exist because of elaborate systems of supply, networks of trade that brought food and fuel from the surrounding countryside, sometimes from hundreds of miles away. When winter came and those networks began to fail, when the roads became impassable and the rivers froze solid and the countryside itself had less to give, the city became a trap. A beautiful, sophisticated trap filled with soaring cathedrals and bustling markets and learned universities, but a trap nonetheless. Let us walk together through the streets of one such city, a composite drawn from many, as autumn gives way to winter. Feel the cobblestones beneath your feet, worn smooth by countless footsteps over the centuries. Notice how the buildings lean close overhead, blocking out much of the sky, creating corridors of shadow even at midday. In summer, this provides welcome shade. In winter, it means the sun, already weak and distant, barely touches the streets at all. The city is preparing. Every household that can afford it is laying in stores. In the cellars beneath the prosperous merchants' homes, you would find barrels of salted pork and beef, wheels of hard cheese wrapped in cloth, sacks of dried peas and beans, crocks of preserved fruit in honey, jars of pickled vegetables. The wealthy might even have spices, precious and expensive, to mask the taste of food that will grow increasingly stale as the months wear on. But walk through the poorer quarters, where the houses are smaller and crampter, where multiple families share single rooms, and you see a different picture. Here, the preparations are more meager. A few strings of onions hanging from the rafters, a small sack of coarse flour, perhaps some dried fish, though it's expensive and many cannot afford it. These families will depend on being able to purchase food throughout the winter, on the markets remaining supplied, on prices staying within reach of their modest means. It's a fragile hope, and as the first snow begins to fall, gentle and almost beautiful in its quiet descent, that fragility is about to be tested. The snow accumulates slowly at first, a dusting that melts by midday, then a few inches that persist in the shadows, then more and more still until the streets are blanketed in white that quickly turns to gray slush under the tramping of feet and the wheels of carts. And then, one night, the temperature plummets, and that slush freezes solid into treacherous ice.
The city begins to close on itself. The gates, normally bustling with traffic, see fewer and fewer carts arriving from the countryside. The roads are too dangerous, the peasants say, the snow too deep. Better to stay home and husband their own resources than risk the journey to market. The city must make do with what it has. And what it has, as the days shorten and the cold deepens, begins to seem very little indeed. The architecture of vulnerability. Let us consider for a moment the medieval city itself, the physical structures that housed this concentration of humanity. For in understanding the buildings, we begin to understand why winter was so particularly deadly within city walls. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and picture a typical medieval house in a prosperous European city. It's not what you might expect if your imagination has been shaped by castles and cathedrals. Most city dwellings were modest affairs, built primarily of timber, with walls of wattle and daub, that ancient mixture of woven sticks plastered over with mud, straw, and sometimes dung. The more fortunate might have some stone in their construction, particularly in the foundation, but wood was the primary building material for the vast majority of urban homes. These houses were tall and narrow, sometimes 3 or 4 stories high, built that way because space within the city walls was precious and expensive. Each floor would jut out slightly beyond the one below, so that the upper stories overhung the street, sometimes so dramatically that neighbors in houses across from each other could nearly shake hands from their top-floor windows. This design had advantages in the warmer months. The overhanging upper floors provided shade to the streets below. The narrow lanes and tall buildings created a kind of natural air conditioning as breezes channeled through the urban canyons. But in winter, these same features became liabilities. The timber frames, often green wood that had been hurriedly assembled during building booms, would warp and crack in the extreme cold. Gaps would open between boards, allowing icy drafts to whistle through. The wattle and daub, never particularly weather-tight to begin with, would crumble and fall away in chunks as the freeze-thaw cycle worked its destructive magic. By midwinter, many houses were more like sieves than shelters, the wind finding its way through 100 tiny openings. The windows, such as they were, offered little protection. Glass was a luxury that only the very wealthy could afford, and even then, only for small panes. Most windows were simply openings in the wall, covered with wooden shutters. Close the shutters, and you have protection from the wind and snow, but you also plunge the interior into darkness. Open them to let in some meager light, and the cold rushes in like a flood. Heating these structures was a constant, often losing battle. The well-to-do might have a proper fireplace with a chimney, though even these were crude by modern standards, losing much of their heat up the flue. The less fortunate made do with a simple fire pit in the main room, the smoke supposed to find its way out through a hole in the roof, though in practice it often just filled the house with choking fumes that stung the eyes and blackened the rafters. And the fuel for these fires, where did it come from? Wood, primarily, and therein lay another vulnerability. A city could go through an astonishing amount of firewood in a single winter. Every household needed it, every workshop and bakery, every church and guild hall. The forests around the city would be steadily depleted as winter dragged on, and the remaining wood had to be hauled from ever more distant sources. When a severe winter hit, when the snows came early and stayed late, the price of firewood could skyrocket to levels that put it beyond the reach of ordinary people. There are records from particularly harsh winters of desperate citizens tearing apart abandoned buildings for fuel, of trees within the city walls being cut down despite laws forbidding it, of furniture and even architectural timbers being fed into fires in a frantic effort to stave off the killing cold. Picture a family huddled in one of these houses on a night deep in winter. The father has managed to get a small fire going in the hearth, but it's a poor, smoky thing, barely pushing back the cold that presses in from all sides. The shutters are closed tight, but still drafts find their way through, making the candle flames dance and flicker. Ice has formed on the inside of the walls in the corners farthest from the fire. The family's breath mists in the air, visible even in the dim firelight. They're wearing all the clothes they own, layers upon layers, and still they shiver. The children huddled together under a pile of threadbare blankets, their faces pale, their lips tinged with blue. The mother ladles out a thin soup, mostly water with a few scraps of vegetables and a hint of grain, stretching their dwindling supplies as far as she can. Everyone is hungry. Everyone has been hungry for weeks now. That gnawing emptiness that never quite goes away, that makes your hands shake and your thoughts slow and foggy. Outside, the wind howls through the narrow streets like a living thing, rattling shutters and whistling through the gaps in the buildings. Snow piles and drifts against the walls. The city, that proud achievement of civilization, feels suddenly very small and fragile against the immensity of winter's assault. And this is just one house, one family. Multiply this scene by thousands, by tens of thousands, and you begin to grasp the scale of suffering that a harsh medieval winter could inflict upon a city. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's slow down, take another deep breath, and turn our attention to one of the most critical vulnerabilities that winter exposed in medieval cities: the question of food. The hungry city. There's something almost mathematical about the way a medieval city could slide from prosperity to starvation, a grim arithmetic that winter made inescapable. Let me walk you through it, gently, step by step, so you can understand how quickly things could unravel. A city, as we've noted, doesn't feed itself. It depends on the countryside, on the farms and villages in the surrounding region to produce a surplus that can be brought to urban markets and sold. In good years, this system works beautifully. Peasants bring their grain and vegetables, their eggs and dairy, their livestock to the city. They sell these goods, take some of the money to pay their rents and taxes, and use the rest to buy things the city produces: tools, cloth, pottery, services.
But this system has a weakness, and that weakness is storage. Grain can be stored, yes, dried and kept in sealed containers where rats and moisture can't get at it. Salted meat can last for months. Cheese can age. But fresh food, the vegetables and dairy and meat that make up so much of a healthy diet, these things are perishable. They must be constantly replenished. In the warmer months, this isn't a problem. Carts arrive daily from the countryside. The markets are always supplied. The flow of food is steady and reliable. But come winter, especially a hard winter, that flow becomes a trickle, and sometimes it stops altogether. Imagine you're standing in the city marketplace in early winter. It's cold, your hands are numb despite your gloves, and your feet ache from standing on the frozen ground. But the market is still functioning, still bustling, even if it's not as lively as in summer. Farmers have made the journey in, their carts laden with cabbages and turnips, sacks of grain, perhaps a few chickens or a pig. The merchants call out their prices, and housewives haggle, counting their coins carefully. But as the weeks pass and the cold deepens, you notice changes. Fewer carts arriving, smaller quantities of food for sale, and the prices begin to climb. A loaf of bread that cost a penny in autumn now costs 2 pennies, then 3. The quality deteriorates as well. The flour is coarser, mixed with more chaff, sometimes even with sawdust or ground acorns to stretch it further. The city authorities try to help, ladling out charity in the form of soup and bread to long lines of the desperate. But their stores, too, are limited, and as winter drags on, even these institutions of mercy find themselves unable to meet the overwhelming need. Let me tell you about a specific winter, documented in the Chronicles, that illustrates how quickly a city could find itself on the brink. It was the winter of 1315 in the English city of York, a prosperous place of perhaps 10,000 souls, a major center of trade and church administration. The previous summer had been terrible, cold and wet, with rain falling almost ceaselessly. The grain had rotted in the fields, and what little could be harvested was moldy and of poor quality. Livestock had suffered too, many dying from disease. The harvest, in short, had been catastrophic. As winter approached, the city fathers knew they faced trouble. But the full scale of the disaster didn't become apparent until the snows came and stayed. The roads into York became impassable. What little food the surrounding countryside had to spare couldn't be transported. The city's own stores, already depleted by a poor harvest, dwindled at an alarming rate. By midwinter, York was starving. The chronicler who recorded these events wrote in stark, haunting terms about what he witnessed. Children with distended bellies and stick-thin limbs, too weak to cry. Adults who moved like ghosts through the streets, their eyes hollow and distant. Corpses discovered frozen in doorways, people who had simply lain down and never gotten up again. The death toll was staggering. In a single season, York may have lost a fifth of its population, perhaps more. The exact numbers are lost to history, but the scale of the catastrophe echoes through the surviving records like a scream. And York was not unique. All across Europe, during what came to be known as the Great Famine, cities suffered similar fates. Some weathered the crisis better than others, but all were tested. All were reminded of how thin the veneer of urban civilization really was, how quickly it could be stripped away by the simple arithmetic of too many mouths and too little food. Take a moment now, as we pause in our tale, to appreciate the warmth and safety of your own space. Feel the softness beneath you, the comfort of knowing that food is available, that the cold is kept at bay. It's a kind of miracle, really, this modern world we inhabit, and perhaps we don't acknowledge that often enough. Breathe deeply and let us continue our journey, for there is more to understand about why winter was so deadly to medieval cities. The plague of cold. If hunger was winter's first weapon against the medieval city, disease was its second, and in some ways even more terrible. For while hunger killed slowly, giving at least some time to adapt or seek help, disease could sweep through a city with horrifying speed, leaving devastation in its wake before anyone quite understood what was happening. The conditions that winter created in a medieval city were, from a modern epidemiological perspective, almost perfectly designed to foster the spread of illness. Let me paint you a picture of why this was so. First, there was the crowding. We've already discussed how medieval city houses were packed closely together, but the crowding extended inside the houses as well. A typical urban dwelling might house not just a nuclear family, but extended relatives, apprentices, servants, and sometimes even the family's livestock, all under one roof. In winter, when everyone retreated indoors to escape the cold, the crowding intensified. Picture a single room, perhaps 15 feet square, lit by a single guttering candle and a smoky fire.
In this space, 10 or 12 people might be living, sleeping side by side on straw mattresses or simply on the floor, their bodies pressed close together for warmth. The air is thick and stale, heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, smoke, cooking odors, and human waste. The shutters are closed tight against the cold, so there's no circulation of fresh air, no way for the room to breathe. This is an environment where disease thrives. When one person falls ill, everyone in that room is exposed, breathing the same air, sharing the same bedding, passing the contagion back and forth like an unwanted gift.
And what diseases stalked the winter streets? Influenza, that ancient scourge, found ideal conditions in the cold, crowded city. A person infected with the flu becomes contagious before they even know they're sick, spreading the virus to everyone around them. In the close quarters of winter, one case could become dozens within days, hundreds within a week. The symptoms, as we know them, haven't changed much over the centuries. The sudden onset of fever and chills, the body aches that make every movement agony, the cough that racks the chest, the exhaustion that makes even lifting your head feel like an insurmountable task. For healthy adults, influenza is miserable but survivable. But for the very young, the elderly, and those already weakened by hunger or other conditions, it could be a death sentence. Medieval people didn't understand what caused the flu, of course. The germ theory of disease was still centuries away. They attributed illness to an imbalance of the body's humors or to bad air, miasmas rising from swamps and cesspits. Some thought it was divine punishment for sin. Their treatments reflected these beliefs, bleeding to restore humoral balance, purging with violent laxatives, herbal concoctions that did little or nothing. In the absence of effective medicine, all they could really do was try to keep the patient warm and comfortable and hope for the best. Many times, hope was not enough. But influenza, as terrible as it was hardly the only winter disease. Pneumonia lurked in the cold, damp air, settling into lungs already irritated by smoke and poor air quality. The infection would take hold, filling the lungs with fluid until every breath became a struggle, until the patient quite literally drowned in their own body's fluids. The rattle, that horrible gurgling sound that signaled the end was near, was all too familiar to medieval people who had sat vigil beside dying loved ones. Tuberculosis, that slow killer, also flourished in winter conditions. The disease spreads through the air when an infected person coughs or sneezes, sending tiny droplets containing the bacteria into the shared space. In the close, unventilated rooms of winter, everyone breathed in everyone else's exhalations, creating perfect conditions for TB to spread from person to person. And then there were the diseases of poor sanitation and hygiene, which winter made worse. Medieval cities had rudimentary sewage systems at best. In many places, human waste was simply thrown out into the street, where it would freeze solid in winter, creating banks of frozen filth along the edges of the roadways. Come a brief thaw or the eventual spring melt, this would all liquefy and seep into the groundwater, contaminating wells and water sources. Dysentery and typhoid fever resulted, diseases of the digestive system that caused violent diarrhea and vomiting. In the weakened, malnourished populations of a city in a harsh winter, these diseases could be fatal, the body simply unable to withstand the dehydration and loss of nutrients. For children especially, winter was treacherous, their immune systems not yet fully developed, their bodies small and vulnerable to the cold. They succumbed to winter illnesses at heartbreaking rates.
There's a reason why so many medieval grave markers note the deaths of young children, why it was common for families to lose half or more of their offspring before adulthood. Let me share with you a personal story from the records, the kind of individual tragedy that helps us understand the larger patterns. In the city of Bristol, in the winter of 1349, a merchant named Thomas Carpenter kept a diary, one of the few surviving personal accounts from an ordinary citizen of the time.
Thomas writes about his family, his wife Margaret, his 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and his elderly mother who lived with them. As winter set in, he notes with concern that his youngest boy, only 4 years old, has developed a cough. Within days, the cough has spread to the rest of the household. Thomas himself feels feverish and weak, but he struggles on, trying to keep his business running, trying to provide for his family. The entries become shorter, more sporadic, as Thomas's own illness progresses. He writes of his terror as his youngest son's condition worsens, the boy's fever raging, his small body convulsing with coughs that bring up blood. The child dies on a Tuesday morning, Thomas records, and the grief in his spare words is palpable, even across the centuries. But there's no time to properly mourn. His daughter is now gravely ill, and his mother, her strength sapped by age, is fading rapidly. The diary entries become almost unbearably sad, Thomas recording death after death in his household. By the time winter releases its grip and spring arrives, he is alone. His entire family has been taken. The final entry is a single line: "I am left behind. God knows why." Stories like Thomas's played out thousands upon thousands of times across medieval Europe during the worst winters. Cities that entered the cold months vibrant and populous emerged in spring diminished, haunted, populated by survivors who walked through streets emptied by death. The psychological toll of this was immense. Imagine living through a winter where you never knew if a cough was just a cough or the beginning of an illness that might kill you or everyone you loved, where the sound of a church bell tolling for the dead became so constant it faded into background noise, where you had to harden your heart to the sight of corpses in the streets because there were simply too many to bury properly, and the ground was frozen too hard to dig graves anyway. Some cities designated areas outside the walls as winter plague pits, mass graves, where the bodies could be piled until spring, when the ground softened enough for proper burial. The psychological weight of knowing that your loved ones might end up in such a place, unconsecrated and anonymous, was yet another burden winter laid upon the medieval urban dweller. The wealthy, it must be said, had some advantages in the face of disease. They could afford better food, which kept their bodies stronger and more able to fight off infection. They had larger houses with more rooms, allowing for some degree of isolation when illness struck. They could hire physicians, though, as we've noted, medieval medicine was of limited effectiveness. But even wealth couldn't fully insulate one from the diseases of winter. The rich died too, perhaps in more comfortable surroundings, but death came for them nonetheless. Let your mind rest for a moment on all this history, all this suffering that seems so distant now. Let it deepen your appreciation for the medical knowledge we possess today, for antibiotics and vaccines, for heated homes and clean water. These gifts of modernity, which we so often take for granted, would have seemed like impossible miracles to our medieval ancestors. Breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly, and let us move forward in our exploration of why winter nearly wiped out entire medieval cities. When the wells froze. Water, that most basic necessity of life, became yet another crisis point for medieval cities when winter tightened its grip. It's something we rarely think about now, turning on a tap and having clean water flow forth, hot or cold as we prefer. But in the medieval city, water was a constant concern, even in the best of times, and winter turned that concern into a matter of life and death. Most medieval cities got their water from a combination of sources. There were wells, both public and private, sunk deep into the earth to reach the water table. There were rivers, if the city was fortunate enough to be built beside one. Some cities had springs, and the more advanced had even constructed aqueducts, remnants of Roman engineering, or new constructions inspired by classical models that brought water from distant sources.
Each of these systems was vulnerable to winter's assault in different ways. Wells could freeze, especially the shallower ones. Imagine approaching your neighborhood well on a bitter January morning, your wooden bucket in hand, your body already aching with thirst, and your household's water needs pressing. You peer down into the well's dark mouth and see not the glint of water far below, but a solid surface of ice. Your bucket, lowered hopefully, strikes the ice with a hollow thunk and goes no further. Now what? You could try to break the ice, but it's thick and the well is deep. You drop stones down, hoping the impact will crack the frozen surface, but they just bounce off, the sound echoing up the well shaft. You might try to heat water and lower it down to melt the ice, but where will you get water to heat? It's a catch-22 that has no easy solution. Some wells had to be abandoned entirely during the worst cold snaps, their ice too thick to break through, not melting again until spring. The people who depended on those wells had to find other sources, putting additional strain on the city's remaining water supply. Rivers, you might think, would be more reliable, harder to freeze completely. And for the most part, this was true. But even rivers had their limits. During severe cold periods, ice would form along the banks, then gradually extend toward the center, the ice shelf growing thicker and reaching further day by day. Eventually, in the coldest winters, even major rivers could freeze solid from bank to bank. This was spectacular to witness, no doubt, a reminder of nature's immense power. Chronicles from various medieval cities record these extraordinary events. The Thames frozen solid enough to support horses and carts, the Seine in Paris locked in ice, the Rhine in Germany becoming a highway of ice rather than a waterway. For a city dependent on its river, this was catastrophic in multiple ways. First, there was the immediate problem of water access. Cutting through thick river ice to reach the water below was difficult and dangerous work. The ice could be several feet thick, requiring axes and picks to penetrate, and once you'd made a hole, you had to prevent it from freezing over again, a constant battle. Second, there was the loss of the river as a transportation route. Medieval cities relied heavily on water transport for moving heavy goods. Grain, timber, coal, all the bulk materials that kept a city functioning came by boat because roads were poor and carts could only carry so much. When the river froze, these supply lines were severed. Third, and perhaps most insidiously, there was the question of water quality. In the warmer months, rivers were essentially self-cleaning to a degree. The flowing water diluted contaminants and carried them away downstream. But when a river froze, it became stagnant under its layer of ice. All the refuse that normally washed away, the sewage and garbage and dead animals, now accumulated, trapped beneath the ice. When people cut through the ice to draw water, they were often drawing from this contaminated, stagnant pool. And when the ice finally melted in spring, all that accumulated filth would be released in a toxic surge that poisoned wells and sickened everyone who depended on the river.
Aqueducts, those marvels of engineering, proved surprisingly vulnerable to cold. The water flowing through them was usually exposed to the air, either in open channels or in pipes that ran above ground. In severe cold, this water would freeze, blocking the entire system. The stone or lead pipes could crack from the expansion of ice, causing breaks that would only be discovered when the thaw came and water started gushing out where it shouldn't. Some cities tried to protect their aqueducts by insulating them with straw or covering them with wooden structures, but these measures were only partially effective. A truly bitter cold snap could defeat even the best preparations. The shortage of water affected every aspect of life in the medieval city. Cooking became more difficult, as did cleaning, though admittedly medieval standards of cleanliness were not high to begin with. Laundry, already an infrequent activity, became almost impossible. People wore the same clothes for weeks or months without washing, adding to the general squalor of winter life. The lack of water also affected industries. Tanners, dyers, brewers, all depended on access to water for their trades. When water became scarce, these businesses ground to a halt, putting people out of work and reducing the city's economic activity to a crawl. And then there was the problem of firefighting. Medieval cities, as we've discussed, were tinderboxes, and the risk of fire was ever present. The standard method of fighting fire was to form a bucket chain, passing containers of water from the nearest source to throw on the flames. But what do you do when the nearest water source is frozen solid? When the river is locked in ice and the wells are inaccessible? There are records of fires during winter that consumed entire neighborhoods, that raged unchecked for days, because there was simply no way to fight them effectively. The cold that had made fire so precious and necessary for survival also made it impossible to control when it escaped its hearths and became destructive. Picture a family in their house, rationing their water carefully. Each person is allowed 1 cup in the morning, 1 in the evening. They save every drop, using the water from cooking to wash their hands, then using that same water, now gray and greasy, to scrub a cooking pot. Nothing is wasted, nothing poured out carelessly. But still, it's not enough. The children cry from thirst, their lips cracked and bleeding. The father ventures out into the dangerous cold, making the long trek to a well on the far side of the city, one of the few still accessible. He waits in a line of other desperate people, shivering, his hands wrapped in rags to protect them from the cold. When his turn finally comes, he fills his bucket, careful not to spill a single precious drop, and begins the long walk home. On the way back, he slips on the ice and falls. The bucket tumbles from his hands, the water spilling out across the frozen street, where it immediately begins to freeze into a treacherous slick. He watches helplessly as hours of effort and his family's water for the day spreads out and is lost. He wants to weep, but even tears seem like an unaffordable waste of moisture.
This is the reality that winter imposed on medieval cities. Every basic necessity became a struggle. Every normal activity fraught with difficulty. The city, that achievement of human organization and ingenuity, was reduced to a kind of survival mode where nothing could be taken for granted. But let us not dwell too long in this cold despair. Let your breath flow easily, let your body relax into comfort, and know that while we explore these hardships, they are long past. They are stories now, lessons from history, not present dangers. And there are still more layers to understand about why winter. The social fabric phrase. As we walk through these imaginary streets, let us look at the people we pass. In the height of summer, the social classes were clearly defined by their dress and their gait. But in the deep winter of the Little Ice Age, everyone became a shapeless bundle of wool and fur. The pride of the guildmaster and the humility of the laborer were buried under layers of whatever fabric could hold in a flicker of body heat.
But beneath the blankets, a quiet tension was simmering. You see, dear listener, a city is held together by unspoken promises. The baker promises bread, the Lord promises protection, the neighbor promises a helping hand. When the grain silos sat empty and the wood piles vanished, those promises began to break. Imagine the great council chambers of a city like Ghent or London. The candles are guttering in the draught, and the powerful men of the city sit wrapped in heavy robes, their breath visible in the candlelight. They are debating, forestalling, and regrating the medieval terms for hoarding. They know that in some cellar, a wealthy merchant is sitting on a mountain of grain, waiting for the prices to triple. They know that outside the gates, the peasants are burning their own fences just to stay alive. The city officials would appoint bread wardens to walk the streets, but as the frost deepened, the authority of the law began to freeze as well. Justice is hard to maintain when the judge is shivering as violently as the accused. Community, which is the very soul of a city, began to retreat behind locked doors. The psychology of the frozen dark. Let us drift now into the inner world, the inner landscape of a person trapped in a city that might be dying. Medieval life was lived by the sun. When the sun set at 4 in the afternoon and didn't return until 8 the next morning, the night became a vast, terrifying ocean of time. Without the distractions of the modern world, the imagination becomes a vivid, sometimes cruel companion. In the flickering light of a single tallow candle, which smelled of animal fat and scorched wick, the shadows on the wall seemed to move. The cold wasn't just a physical sensation, it was perceived as a spiritual presence.
Many believed that the extreme cold was a physical manifestation of divine displeasure. They looked at the frozen gargoyles on the church eaves and saw demons waiting for the fires to go out. The danse macabre, the dance of death, wasn't just an artistic motif, it was a mental reality. Death was a neighbor who had moved in for the season, sitting at the table, sleeping in the bed. Can you feel the heaviness of that long, dark night? The way the hours seemed to stretch until time itself felt frozen. And yet, in that darkness, there was a strange, desperate intimacy. Families who might have bickered in the summer now slept in a single great bed. Grandparents, parents, and children all pressed together, sharing the only thing they had left, the warmth of their own blood. The strange industries of winter. While much of the city ground to a halt, new, strange industries emerged from the ice. Let us watch a group of men working by the riverside. These are the icebreakers. Their job is one of the most dangerous in the city. Armed with long iron poles and heavy mallets, they stand on the shifting, groaning sheets of the frozen river, trying to keep a channel open for the few remaining supply boats. The sound of their work, the rhythmic thud of iron on ice, echoes through the streets like a heartbeat. If they fail, the city's last artery is severed. If they fall in, the current beneath the ice will sweep them away into a dark, silent grave before they can even scream. Nearby, in the damp cellars of the city, the salt sifters are at work. Salt was the only thing standing between the city and starvation. It preserved the meat and fish that had been slaughtered in the autumn. But salt is hygroscopic. It draws moisture from the air. In the damp cold of a medieval winter, the salt would clump and spoil.
These workers spent their days over small charcoal braziers, carefully drying and sifting the white gold that kept the rot at bay. The animal neighbors. As the humans retreated, the animals of the city faced their own reckoning. In a medieval city, you lived alongside pigs, chickens, and the ever-present rats. In winter, these animals became both a blessing and a curse. A cow or horse kept in a ground-floor stable was a source of living heat, their massive bodies acting like organic furnaces for the rooms above. But as the hay ran out, these animals began to starve too. A city without horses was a city without transport, without the power to move the very snow that was burying it. And then there were the rats. As the outdoor food sources froze, the rats moved deeper into the homes of the humans. They were the silent competitors for every scrap of grain, every rind of cheese. They carried the fleas that would eventually bring the Great Plague, but in the winter, they were simply the thieves of the night, their scratching behind the wattle and daub walls, a constant reminder of how little stood between the family and the void. The frozen marketplace. It is mid-February now. The festive spirit of Christmas is a distant, mocking memory. The square is a wasteland of gray ice and frozen refuse. A few stalls remain, but they do not sell fresh fruit or fine cloth. They sell hardwares, frozen fish that must be shattered with an axe, dried peas as hard as pebbles, and the second-hand goods of the dying.
Look at the faces of the shoppers. They are no longer haggling for sport. They are bartering their last possessions. A silver spoon for a sack of coal, a warm cloak for a barrel of salted herring. This was the winter economy, a desperate redistribution of wealth where the only currency that mattered was calories and BTUs. The breaking point, the Great Frost of 1407. To understand just how close these cities came to the edge, let us look at a year where the world seemed to turn to glass, the winter of 1407. In Paris, the frost was so severe that the bells of Notre Dame couldn't be rung for fear they would shatter like crystal. The wine in the taverns froze in the barrels and had to be sold by the pound, chiseled out in purple shards. In London, the Thames didn't just freeze, it became a solid plain of ice that lasted for 15 weeks. Think of that, nearly 4 months where the city's primary highway was a tomb. The birds froze mid-flight and tumbled from the sky like stones. But even in this extremity, we see the stubbornness of the human spirit. On the ice of the Thames, the first frost fairs began to appear. People, desperate for light and warmth, built bonfires on the very ice that imprisoned them. They roasted oxen over the frozen depths, a defiant gesture against a nature that seemed determined to erase them. The closing of the gates. But for every moment of defiance, there were 100 moments of quiet tragedy. The city gates, usually symbols of welcome and commerce, became barriers of exclusion. As the surrounding countryside starved, refugees fled toward the city walls, hoping for the charity of the church or the king. But the city had nothing left to give. The guards on the walls, their hands numb inside their iron gauntlets, had the grim task of turning away the hungry. To let them in was to ensure that everyone, citizen and refugee alike, would starve before the thaw. The trap of the city, which we spoke of earlier, had now been sprung. Those inside were prisoners of their own walls, watching as the world outside turned into a white, featureless desert. Transition to stillness. Take another deep breath now.
Feel the air as it enters your lungs, crisp, clean, and safe. We have wandered through the darkest hours of the medieval winter, but the story is not yet finished. As you settle deeper into your pillows, let the image of the frozen city soften. The harsh edges of the ice are blurring. The howling wind is becoming a low, rhythmic hum. You are safe. You are warm. The stories of the past are like the embers of a fire, glowing softly, providing light without the sting of the cold. In Part 2, we will explore the inner hearth, how the medieval mind found solace, the legends they told to explain the frost, and the secret ways they kept the spark of life flickering when the world turned to stone. But for now, just listen to the silence. It is no longer a heavy weight, but a soft blanket, tucking you in, guiding you toward a deep and restorative sleep.
Let us sink deeper now, past the frozen streets and through the thick oak doors of a home. Feel the transition from the biting, metallic air of the outside to the heavy, stagnant warmth of the interior. This is the hearth, the soul of the medieval home. In the winter, the hearth was not just a place for cooking, it was the boundary between life and the void. In our world, heat is invisible. It flows through vents and radiators, effortless and constant. But to our ancestors, heat was a precious, living thing that had to be tended like a sickly child. The fire was never allowed to truly go out. To let the embers die in the middle of a January night was considered more than a misfortune. It was an omen of death. Imagine the cover fire or couvre-feu, the origin of our word curfew. As the bells rang out across the frozen city, families would place a metal hood over the glowing coals to keep them alive until morning. The smell of that house, a thick mixture of wood smoke, dried herbs, and the sweet, heavy scent of beeswax becomes a protective cocoon. As you lie there, imagine you were part of that circle. The flickering orange light dances across the timber beams of the ceiling. The corners of the room are lost in soft, velvet shadows. Here, the world shrinks to the reach of the firelight. Outside, the city may be teetering on the edge of a frozen apocalypse, but here, within this small circle of warmth, there is a profound, quiet peace. The weaver of tales. When the body is confined, the mind must travel. In the long winter nights, when the work of the fields and the markets was impossible, the medieval city became a city of stories. This was the season of the spinsters, the women who sat by the fire, their fingers flying as they spun wool into thread, their voices spinning tales into the air. Listen to the rhythmic whir of the spinning wheel. It is a hypnotic sound, like the purring of a great cat. To this rhythm, the legends of the frost were born. The people didn't see the winter as a mere weather pattern. They saw it as the old man winter, a cold and indifferent giant walking the rooftops. They told stories of the Jack Frost of their time, a spirit whose breath turned the window shutters to iron and whose touch stilled the hearts of the unwary. In the German-speaking cities, they whispered of Frau Holle, the goddess of the sky. When she shook her feather bed, it snowed upon the earth. If she was pleased, the snow was a protective blanket for the winter wheat. If she was angry, it was a suffocating shroud. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were a way to give a face to the faceless cold, to make the vast and terrifying power of nature feel, in some small way, human. The calendar of light.
To keep from falling into despair, the medieval city followed a meticulous calendar of light. They knew that the darkness could swallow a soul if it wasn't punctuated by hope. Think of the O Sapiencia days leading up to midwinter, the lighting of small, precious candles that cast a golden glow against the frosted stone of the cathedrals. They celebrated the feast of St. Lucy, the bringer of light, where young girls wore crowns of candles, their flames reflecting in the ice-covered windows like distant stars. Then came the Yule log, a tradition brought from the countryside into the heart of the stone city. A massive trunk, often saved from the previous year's harvest, would be dragged into the great halls. It was meant to burn for 12 days and nights. For those 12 days, the hierarchy of the city softened. The master and the servant sat by the same flame. For a brief moment, the shared threat of the winter created a shared humanity.
Can you see the glow of that log? Feel its heat reaching out, pushing back the shadows that huddled in the corners. The wood pops and crackles, releasing the trapped sunlight of the previous summer. It is a reminder that the sun is not gone forever. It is merely resting, gathering its strength beneath the horizon. The secret language of the frost. While the scholars in the universities wrote in Latin about the humors of the air, the common people developed a secret language for the winter. They had dozens of words for snow: the meal snow that was light and dry, the crust ice that could cut a leather boot, and the death quiet, that particular silence that preceded a blizzard. They looked for signs in the hearth. If the soot on the chimney back glowed with sparks like stars, it meant a thaw was coming. If the cat sat with its back to the fire, a deeper freeze was on its way. This was the folk science of survival, a way to feel a sense of control over a world that seemed determined to freeze them out. They also believed in the breath of the ancestors. When the frost formed beautiful, intricate patterns on the inside of the windows, feathers, ferns, and lace of ice, they told the children that these were messages from those who had survived winters past. They were maps of a spirit world, reminding the living that they were part of a long, unbroken chain of endurance. The alchemy of winter food. In the absence of fresh meat, the medieval kitchen turned to a kind of winter alchemy. Imagine the peas pottage, a thick gray stew of dried peas that had been simmering for days. It was seasoned with winter savory and perhaps a small piece of salt pork that had been saved since November. Eating in the winter was a slow, deliberate act. There was no rushing. Every spoonful was a victory. The bread, often made from a mixture of rye and ground beans, was hard and dense, requiring it to be soaked in the pottage to be edible. But it was hearty. It stayed in the belly, providing a slow-burning fuel for the body's internal furnace. And then there was the mulled drink, cider or ale heated with a red-hot poker straight from the fire, spiced with cinnamon and cloves if the family was lucky. The sanctuary of the hearth. Let us sink deeper now, past the brittle frozen streets and through the thick oak doors of a home. Feel the transition from the biting, metallic air of the outside to the heavy, stagnant warmth of the interior. This is the hearth, the soul of the medieval home. In the winter, the hearth was not just a place for cooking, it was the boundary between life and the void. In our world, heat is invisible. It flows through vents and radiators, effortless and constant. But to our ancestors, heat was a precious, living thing that had to be tended like a sickly child. The fire was never allowed to truly go out. To let the embers die in the middle of a January night was considered more than a misfortune. It was an omen of death. Imagine the cover fire, or couvre-feu, the origin of our word curfew.
as the bells rang out across the wood smoke, dried herbs and the sweet, heavy scent of beeswax becomes a protective cocoon. As you lie there, imagine you are part of that circle. The flickering orange light dances across the timber beams of the ceiling. The corners of the room are lost in soft, velvet shadows. Here, the world shrinks to the reach of the firelight. Outside, the city may be teetering on the edge of a frozen apocalypse, but here, within this small circle of warmth, there is a profound, quiet peace.
The weaver of tales. When the body is confined, the mind must travel. In the long winter nights, when the work of the fields and the markets was impossible, the medieval city became a city of stories. This was the season of the spinsters, the women who sat by the fire, their fingers flying as they spun wool into thread, their voices spinning tales into the air. Listen to the rhythmic whir of the spinning wheel. It is a hypnotic sound, like the purring of a great cat. To this rhythm, the legends of the frost were born. The people didn't see the winter as a mere weather pattern. They saw it as the old man winter, a cold and indifferent giant walking the rooftops. They told stories of the Jack Frost of their time, a spirit whose breath turned the window shutters to iron and whose touch stilled the hearts of the unwary. In the German-speaking cities, they whispered of Frau Holle, the goddess of the sky. When she shook her feather bed, it snowed upon the earth. If she was pleased, the snow was a protective blanket for the winter wheat. If she was angry, it was a suffocating shroud. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were a way to give a face to the faceless cold, to make the vast and terrifying power of nature feel, in some small way, human. The calendar of light. To keep from falling into despair, the medieval city followed a meticulous calendar of light. They knew that the darkness could swallow a soul if it wasn't punctuated by hope. Think of the O Sapientia days leading up to midwinter, the lighting of small, precious candles that cast a golden glow against the frosted stone of the cathedrals. They celebrated the feast of Saint Lucy, the bringer of light. Her young girls wore crowns of candles, their flames reflecting in the ice-covered windows like distant stars. Then came the Yule log, a tradition brought from the countryside into the heart of the stone city. A massive trunk, often saved from the previous year's harvest, would be dragged into the great halls. It was meant to burn for 12 days and nights. For those 12 days, the hierarchy of the city softened. The master and the servant sat by the same flame. For a brief moment, the shared threat of the winter created a shared humanity. The steam rises in the cold room, smelling of orchards and far-off lands. As you sip this imaginary warmth, feel your muscles finally let go of the tension they've held all day. The warmth spreads from your chest to your fingertips, a gentle tide of comfort. The warmth spreads from your chest to your fingertips, a gentle tide of comfort. The dreams of the frozen. As the night deepens, the city enters a state of collective dreaming. In the medieval mind, sleep in winter was closer to hibernation. The metabolic rate slowed. The world outside ceased to exist. Their dreams were often of green fields and the first bite of a fresh apple. They dreamt of the green man, the spirit of the woods, who was currently sleeping beneath the permafrost. These dreams were not just escapism. They were a symptom of the deep hunger for life, the hope of renewal, the belief that the winter was not eternal. Can you see the glow of that log? Feel its heat reaching out, pushing back the shadows that huddle in the corners?
The wood pops and crackles, releasing the trapped sunlight of the previous summer. It is a reminder that the sun is not gone forever. It is merely resting, gathering its strength beneath the horizon. The secret language of the frost. While the scholars in the universities wrote in Latin about the humors of the air, the common people developed a secret language for the winter. They had dozens of words for snow: the meal snow that was light and dry, the crust ice that could cut a leather boot, and the death quiet, that particular silence that preceded a blizzard. They looked for signs in the hearth. If the soot on the chimney back glowed with sparks like stars, it meant a thaw was coming. If the cat sat with its back to the fire, a deeper freeze was on its way. This was the folk science of survival, a way to feel a sense of control over a world that seemed determined to freeze them out. They also believed in the breath of the ancestors. When the frost formed beautiful, intricate patterns on the inside of the windows, feathers, ferns, and lace of ice, they told the children that these were messages from those who had survived winters past. They were maps of a spirit world, reminding the living that they were part of a long, unbroken chain of endurance. The alchemy of winter food. In the absence of fresh meat, the medieval kitchen turned to a kind of winter alchemy. Imagine the peas pottage, a thick gray stew of dried peas that had been simmering for days. It was seasoned with winter savory and perhaps a small piece of salt pork that had been saved since November. Eating in the winter was a slow, deliberate act. There was no rushing. Every spoonful was a victory. The bread, often made from a mixture of rye and ground beans, was hard and dense, requiring it to be soaked in the pottage to be edible. But it was hearty. It stayed in the belly, providing a slow-burning fuel for the body's internal furnace.
The awakening of the waters. Now, the silence of the winter is replaced by a roar. Imagine the river. For months, it has been a silent highway of stone. But now, deep beneath the surface, the water is surging. The ice begins to groan and heave, a sound like cannon fire echoing through the narrow streets. This was a time of both joy and terror. As the ice broke into massive flows, it would batter against the stone piers of the city bridges. The bridge wardens would stand watch through the night, torches in hand, praying that the structures would hold against the crushing weight of the retreating winter. When the river finally ran clear, the first boats would appear on the horizon. Can you see them? Small, sturdy cogs, laden with the first fresh supplies from the coast. Salted fish, yes, but also the first greens of spring, perhaps some fresh butter and the precious grain that would prevent the city's stores from running dry. The sight of a sail was better than any sermon. It was the return of the world. The opening of the gates. Let us walk together toward the great North Gate. For months it has been closed, the iron portcullis rusted in its tracks by the frost. Now, a dozen men strain at the winches. With a slow, heavy clack, 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 the gate rises. The city exhales. People who had been huddled in smoky rooms for 100 days spill out into the light. They look different, paler, thinner, their eyes squinting against the unaccustomed brightness. But there is a frantic, joyful energy in their movements. Neighbors who hadn't seen each other since the first snow embrace in the slush. The winter markets are swept away, replaced by the spring fairs. The smell of the city changes instantly. The heavy scent of soot and tallow is replaced by the raw, earthy smell of wet stone and turning soil. The resilience of the seed.
Outside the walls, the transformation is even more profound. The white desert is receding, revealing the dark, sodden earth. And there, in the sheltered hollows, are the first green shoots. Medieval people looked at these shoots with a kind of religious awe. They called it the resurrection of the earth. They knew that beneath that killing frost, life had been waiting. The wheat that had been sown in the autumn and buried under 3 feet of snow was now reaching for the sun. This resilience of the earth mirrored the resilience of the city. Though the winter had taken its toll, though many hearths were now cold and many beds were empty, the community had survived. They had been tested by the ultimate force of nature and had not broken. They began the work of repair, patching the wattle and daub walls, replacing the warped timber beams, and clearing the refuse of the winter from the streets. The legacy of the long cold. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, let us consider how those long, terrible winters changed us. The Little Ice Age wasn't just a period of suffering, it was a forge that shaped the modern world.
And then there was the mulled drink, cider or ale heated with a red-hot poker straight from the fire, spiced with cinnamon and cloves if the family was lucky. The sanctuary of the hearth. Let us sink deeper now, past the frozen streets and through the thick oak doors of a home. Feel the transition from the biting metallic air of the outside to the heavy, stagnant warmth of the interior. This is the hearth, the soul of the medieval home. In the winter, the hearth was not just a place for cooking, it was the boundary between life and the void. In our world, heat is invisible. It flows through vents and radiators, effortless and constant. But to our ancestors, heat was a precious living thing that had to be tended like a sickly child. The fire was never allowed to truly go out. To let the embers die in the middle of a January night was considered more than a misfortune. It was an omen of death. Imagine the cover fire, or couvre-feu, the origin of our word curfew. As the bells rang out across the frozen city, families would place a metal hood over the glowing coals to keep them alive until morning. The smell of that house, a thick mixture of wood smoke, dried herbs, and the sweet, heavy scent of beeswax becomes a protective cocoon. As you lie there, imagine you are part of that circle. The flickering orange light dances across the timber beams of the ceiling. The corners of the room are lost in soft, velvet shadows. Here, the world shrinks to the reach of the firelight. Outside, the city may be teetering on the edge of a frozen apocalypse, but here, within this small circle of warmth, there is a profound, quiet peace. In the great monasteries, the monks would rise in the middle of the night to sing the matins, their voices rising in the freezing air of the chapel, the notes hanging like pillars of mist. They prayed for the sun of righteousness to rise. Their singing was a bridge between the dark and the light, a rhythmic assurance that the world was still being watched over, even when it felt abandoned by the heat. The thaw of the soul. Take a long, slow breath. We are lingering here in the heart of the winter because it is here that the human spirit is most visible. In the ease of summer, we are individuals. In the trial of a medieval winter, we are a single, huddling organism. The city, for all its vulnerability, was a testament to the fact that humans would rather face the ice together than the warmth alone. As the embers of our imaginary hearth begin to fade into a soft, pulsing red, let your eyelids grow heavier. The stories are doing their work.
The cold of the past is only a contrast to the warmth of your present. You are tucked away in the safety of the now, while the then whispers its lessons of resilience. In Part 3, we will witness the coming of the spring, the breaking of the ice, the rebirth of the markets, and how those who survived changed the world forever. We will see the first green shoots breaking through the slush and the opening of the city gates to a new, transformed world. But for now, there is only the glow, only the rhythmic spinning of the wheel, only the deep, dark, and protective night. Take a deep, slow breath with me now. Imagine the air is no longer sharp and biting, but holds a faint, elusive softness. In the medieval city, the end of winter didn't arrive with a sudden burst of heat, but with a change in the wind, the south wind, which the poets of the time called the breath of life. Listen closely. Can you hear it? It is the sound of 1,000,000 tiny raindrops hitting the frozen crust of the snow. At first, it sounds like a whisper, then a steady drumming. This is the great thaw. To us, it might seem messy and gray, but to the medieval soul, this was the most beautiful music in the world. It was the sound of the prison walls melting away. The ice on the windows begins to weep, the intricate patterns we spoke of earlier dissolving into clear streaks that reveal the world outside for the first time in months. The gray, leaden sky cracks open, revealing a sliver of pale, watery blue. It is a fragile light, but it is enough. It is the promise. Kept.
Because the winters were so harsh, medieval cities had to become smarter. They developed better ways to store food, leading to the great masonry granaries that still stand in European squares today. They improved their chimneys and developed the first tiled stoves, turning the hearth from a smoky fire pit into an efficient engine of warmth. But more than that, it changed the way we think about each other. The poor laws and the systems of communal charity that began in these cities were born from the realization that in the face of the great cold, no man is an island. We learned that the survival of the city depended on the survival of the weakest member. The social contract was written in the frost. It was the understanding that we build walls not just to keep enemies out, but to keep the warmth in, to create a space where humanity can flourish even when the stars turn to ice. The sun sets on the tale. The light is fading now in our story, but it is a warm, golden twilight of a spring evening. The city is quiet again, but it is a peaceful quiet. The sound of a distant flute carries over the rooftops. Somewhere, a mother is singing a lullaby to a child who will grow up in a world that is slowly, surely warming. The little ice age would eventually pass, retreating back into the mountain glaciers and the polar wastes. But the stories remain. They are the embers we carry with us, reminding us that no matter how long the night, the sun always returns. No matter how thick the ice, the water always flows. A final blessing of sleep. Let your mind rest now. The frozen streets of York, the icy bridges of Paris, the smoky hearths of London, they are all drifting away into the mist of history. You have traveled through the heart of the storm and come out into the light of the spring. Your room is warm, your blankets are soft. The history of the world is a long, winding path, and tonight, your journey on that path has reached a place of perfect rest. The whispers of the past are fading, the shadows are still. The warmth of the present is all that remains. Sleep, dear friend. Sleep deeply and dream of the first green leaves of a spring that never ends.